Father in heaven, whatever it is that we each woke up today feeling about ourselves, may we somehow feel differently because you have created us, and you have created us to love one another and to appreciate beauty and to make a difference. In Jesus' name, amen. We have been talking about some of the distinctions in spirituality in terms of the ethical implications of spirituality, in terms of Christianity in context with other spiritual traditions. We will be doing a combination of sort of talking about spirituality and attempting to experiment with. You know why we say bless you? It's a spirituality issue, actually. It really is. Because there have been multiple cultures, especially Western European, that believe that when you sneeze, that you actually had your spirit, your soul, partially at least, leave your body. Because there's been this blend of notion about our breath and about that ethereal part of us that sort of, we hope, means that after we die, that's not all there is ever again to us. And so when we would say bless you, we would try to pronounce a blessing to cause the spirit to stay intact.
I thought it was because your heart temporarily stops when you sneeze.
Well, I have heard that. I think people said that I think that that's true, that people did say that and believe that. But I don't know how they'd know that.
Just a nursing major that told me, I guess.
Oh, well, I think now we would know. I don't know how with an EKG, like even if we did a 12 lead, I don't know how we would tell, because the artifacts that would be introduced to the signal by the impulses that go to the muscles, what would we be looking at on the EKG? We'd be looking at artifact from the muscular from the nerve signals to the muscle contraction. I don't know how we pick up the subtlety of from the SA or AV. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think though that people did believe that because they thought that your actual life went out of you, and they knew that dead people had their heart stopped. So I think they might have reasoned that it did stop. This mix-up though of the spirit and the soul, and sometimes using it interchangeably, and then some cultures only having one concept that takes in both things, really gets at what people historically have been having in mind when they say spirituality or they say spirit. Why do we even say spirit? Do you know, if you go down to the sort of dimly lit part of Safeway, the part that's got like big aisles of expensive bottles of alcohol with nightclub kind of track lighting above it instead of regular grocery store lighting. If you go in there, some of the things in there, all the bottles that probably cost more than some beverages, there are some of those liquids that are referred to as spirits. You ever heard anyone call alcohol spirits? You've got beer and wine and spirits, right? It'll be on the menu. People will say we have beer and wine and spirits at a restaurant. Well, why do they say that they have spirits? Anyone want to venture a guess? Why would they say that it has that we have spirits? The things that are referred to, the alcoholic beverages that are referred to as spirits. Now, beer is not a spirit, is it? And wine is not a spirit. But the spirits are distilled. They're distilled beverages. And distillation involves a process of evaporating things out. When things evaporate out, they become invisible. When they turn to vapor, they become vaporous. This whole process was actually seen as when something would evaporate out, it involved the spirit world. Spirit means air. So when we talk about a class in Christian spirituality, we're talking about a class in Christian airality, breathality, or something like that. We've taken it to mean, even though the word that gets used in other ways, like to describe one kind of an alcoholic beverage over another. And by the way, you won't find that was never exactly used in the Bible to describe. You know what? Can anyone tell me how they describe? This is a trick question. Can anyone tell me how in the Bible they described hard liquor? Something we would call spirits today. Can anyone tell me how they described it back then, as opposed to like ale or beer or wine?
Strong drink.
That's a good guess. Because they talk about, they're commanded in a particular alternative to a religious feast, if it was too far for them to travel to pay their tithe. They were supposed to take their tithe money, 1/10 of all of their income, and then use it to buy all kinds of meats and wine and strong drink and whatever their heart lusted after is what it says, and then celebrate to the Lord. That was instead of paying tithes to the priests, they were to do that. I don't know. Put that in your Adventism for a bit, see how it comes out the other end. But how you doing? Good to see you. That's a tricky thing, though. You know why? Asking you what they called liquor. There was no such thing. It literally had not been invented. The Bible, everything we call the Bible, was already written between 4th and 5th century CE, AD. The Arabs invented distillation to apply to alcoholic beverages. Before that time, alcoholic beverages could only have maybe 14% alcohol, because the ambient yeasts die when the alcohol gets to that point, and you can't increase its horsepower if you can't distill it, and it wasn't a thing until several centuries after the Bible was written. So wine is definitely when they ferment grape juice, in the Greek oinos. But strong drink was people that don't have enough money or land, or don't stay put because they're nomadic, so they can't cultivate grapes. They would grab whatever grasses or weeds or whatever. There was some preferred more than another, ragweed and whatever stuff they could get, and then ferment that as they went along. Sort of like the people in jail make Pruno out of whatever they can get it, say from their lunches, their fruit cocktail from lunch, and put it in a garbage bag and hide it somewhere, and then drink it when it rots. That's what strong drink was whatever like vegetable matter with sugar content they could get to do that. How does that relate to Christian spirituality? How does that relate to Christian spirituality? It relates importantly. Today, it has become a spiritual, a religious issue that has serious spiritual implications. In our religious fellowship, we've got some people who consider in the culture around us, who consider that a serious part of their spirituality actually involves alcoholic beverage. In the Christian tradition, even celebrating communion, the Eucharist, involves actual alcoholic beverage. And Adventists take the position that that's not a good plan, that we should completely abstain from alcohol altogether. We have reinterpreted Bible passages to try to make the Bible say that we shouldn't drink wine or beer or ale or anything like that. Whatever the Bible says about it, I'm going to say that even if the Bible doesn't say, you probably should just leave alcohol alone. Even if the Bible shows major characters using alcoholic beverages, that was a time where it wasn't risky business like it is today. There's no way somebody like on food stamps could and other public assistance could go to Costco and get a 2-gallon cardboard box full of high alcohol content, enhanced alcohol content wine with a spout on the side and hurt themselves. Or go and get a big thing of Jack Daniels, even when they don't have a car to drive. They walk to the store and get a big old Jackie V. That didn't happen. It wasn't available. Somebody that was trying to drink themselves to a stupor would have to, I think their bladder would be a limiting factor back then. You'd have to really want to. And you'd have to be really wealthy to do it with wine. You'd have to be filthy rich. So the common people were saved from being ridiculous with wine, because unless they broke into the palace or something, where would they get that much wine? Poor people wouldn't have it. So it's interesting, though, that even the little bit of change in state of consciousness that people get when they use even a little wine, people have come, in the culture around us, have come to involve that as a part of their spirituality. People use alcohol to get themselves to relax. They use alcohol to manage stress. They use alcohol to facilitate having friendly relationships with other people, and even to facilitate romantic relationships. If you took the alcohol away from many people, their relationships might fall apart. If you just took it away right now and you had nothing else to fill the role that it's filling, because they're using it as a thing. And Adventists are taking a position that is not a thing. It's not a thing we use. And I agree with that. But what do we have as Adventists? What do we have instead? What is there? Just not? You tell somebody they're getting some bennies out of something, say, well, it's a major risks. Like, if you use it, let me know, send me a postcard from rehab someday when it just happens to converge with one of the worst times of your life and you turn to the bottle. That's a thing. That is a thing. It changes you changes your whole life when you decide you're going to use alcohol. But what would happen if Adventists didn't have to take a position like some sort of naggy policeman or yangy authoritarian parent in telling people that What if there was a way to crowd it out with something that's more of a thrill and that facilitates all those things even better?
I think traditionally what we have as Adventists, and it may be not the best way, or may be the best way under circumstances, is our time factor. Not only the Sabbath, but traditionally in families that were Adventists for several generations have always had morning worship, evening worship together with, whoever constitutes
Yes.
family.
Yes.
That tends to, allow us to connect with people a lot better. And of course, the worship time is not for maybe marital or kids and all, but it's a family with a vertical intent to know
Yes.
God better.
Well, we surveyed this group, was it last week or week before? We surveyed this group, and I asked, how many of you had come up with this regular family tradition of like having morning worship, that sort of thing? 7, right?
Yeah.
We had 7 people out of 30 some odd people. I'm not gonna survey, but if I surveyed and said, how many of you even really came from a household, that wasn't just you and your mom or whatever. We're getting to a point where the family structure and so people are finding other ways to take the edges off, to be able to relax. And if you look in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, if you look in the Gospels, you will find that Adventists are not the first people to be relatively, number one, prohibitive, but also sort of scrutinizing. I'll euphemize that, scrutinizing of people who just spend their time getting together and drinking and that sort of thing. What was Jesus' posture toward people who are getting together and doing things like that? Anybody know? What did Jesus do when he was here with people who are getting together and what we would say today, partying? He went with them.
He reached out to them when no one else would.
He gave them wine too.
You're a heretic. Is your hand up?
No.
Okay. I'm not advocating an alcohol ministry. I've never tasted alcohol. I've never, and it's not by virtue of Adventism, because I wasn't raised Adventist. I became an Adventist separate from my family halfway through growing up, and I already made a decision about alcohol because of what I saw it doing to the grown-ups around me. But if most people in our culture are finding something to be indispensable, then that means there's something that they're getting from it, or it would just die out. However, I've actually spent a good deal of time talking with people that have a different attitude than I do about using substances. Everything from alcohol to pot to LSD to ayahuasca and mushrooms. You name it, and I have been with the people who do it and asked them and continue to explain to me, but I've never used any of those things. But asking what it did to their perspective on life, asking what good they get out of it, as well as what problems it's brought for them, I found that very fortunately, and maybe I'm just lucky, the things that people describe as benefits from those things, including LSD, mushrooms, and ayahuasca, when they describe those things, I'm able to say honestly, oh yeah, I know what you mean. Here's how I get that. Honestly. Now, it's been a lot of my life that I've had access to people that have used acid. My dad used acid when I was a child, and so did his friends. And to this day, I still ask him, reflecting on their situations. The reason is that they describe it as a very spiritual thing. That it changed their perspective. Now I've known people who, in each of these cases, with all of those substances and the practices that go along with them, I've also known people who, for every one of those things, have ruined the rest of their life 100% absolutely after the first time they used them. Absolutely ruined their life. In one way or another, it screwed them up and they're not coming back. So it's a roulette. Is there anything? Is there really anything? Not just something wild where we have to go to some remote mountain village on another continent and go to 13,000 feet and find a guru in a hut or something and give up all of our life in this culture. Is there anything that fits within Christian spirituality that can give you some actual bang for your buck? When you go to church, when you open up a devotional book, when you study your Sabbath school lesson, when you carefully avoid eating bacon at Denny's, when you keep your pants up, when you put your tithe in the tithe envelope, honest tithe, and throw it in, when you come to class here instead of at Chico State or Arizona State, and the instructor has prayer at the beginning, and I have no idea. Does that happen in most? Is that common in courses at PUC? People generally have prayer. If it's a religion class, I mean, or do they do it like if you take math or science or something like that too?
In the beginning.
Some of them do. So it doesn't surprise you when it happens. Would it surprise you if you went to Arizona State University or Berkeley and somebody did it? You go, that was a thing, right? Do you get enough from those things I listed? Do you say, I'm good, I'm full? So, in what remains of our 10 weeks together, I'd like to, we'll be studying about spirituality, yes. I'd like to somehow offer each person here some stuff that isn't like the soda you shake up and let all the bubbles out of, something that actually stirs, something that actually has some bang for the buck. I'd like to offer you some real stuff. You can think of it however you want. Each person here has some attitude or another about how you're relating to religion and spirituality. When we've said, we made distinctions between religion and spirituality. And so we know, if I say spirituality, kind of for our purposes, we're talking about one thing, and when I say religion, we're talking about another. But they overlap. Yes, Hannah.
I think you can get that kind of spirituality when you go through a personal suffering.
Okay.
And you find triumph through asking God.
What kinds of sufferings do you think are powerful in that way?
Something that's very personal to you that you really care about. So whether it be like a death of someone, or academically, or something that you really value.
Okay. Have you known people that find out that they're going to die, or they probably are going to die, and then it impacts their spirituality, like you're saying?
Yeah, I do.
Me too. I've known a bunch of people, and your point is a powerful point. When a lot of times when somebody has like they get a death sentence, you know, medically, whatever. Or they have an accident and their life flashes before their eyes, or the bullets are flying overhead, whatever. I'll mention a case of a guy who, I took a group of PUC prep students, this was years ago, took a group of like 6 or 7 PUC prep students when we had a service day where they were gonna go help the community. I had heard of a guy that lived not very far from the flashing red light, in the housing bit just southeast of the flashing red light. There's some houses up into that first block. The guy was dying of AIDS. He had contracted AIDS in San Francisco's gay scene back before we knew what AIDS was. And since that time, he was asymptomatic and not diagnosed, but he was in an exclusive relationship with some guy that he had met during that same bit, and they got out of there and started successful careers and bought this house in St. Helena. And then the symptoms came, so he went and was diagnosed. And when I was there, every part of him, I think, was in pain. His mouth was inflamed, his lips were inflamed, his throat was inflamed. His lips were like blown up like with a bicycle pump, and cracked and bleeding. He was putting Vaseline on them all the time, and there were sores. And it hurt. He said it hurt when he sat in a chair and everything. He'd had all kinds of surgeries from actual like infections in organs and things like that. And he wasn't going to make it through the rest of the year. And he came in and said, "How are you doing? You know, how's your courage?" And it was unexpected, and it was mind-blowing for all of us that were there, that he said, "I have never been happier. The joy of life." And he was crying when he said it. He said, "Being sick is the best thing that ever happened to me. I never bothered to live and pay attention to how much I loved living until I got sick. It means the world to me. Every day is so precious." And he said, "I have never been this, spiritually jubilant." Wow. I'm not sure I want to sign up for that course in spirituality right now. Yes.
As far as like the death and the disease thing, I don't think it always has to take someone like almost like dying, because like I know people that have like experienced like a big like change in their spirituality through like as simple as watching a movie. Or
Yes.
something like impacting them like that. So it doesn't have to be like a life or death situation, or like someone in their family dies and then they find themselves or anything like that.
You're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be any of those things. Sometimes people have, in Christianity and other religions, but in Christianity, in the history of Christian spirituality pursuit, people have arranged ordeals and suffering for themselves on purpose, trying. See, I think they noticed a spiritual shift by someone else's testimony. They noticed it. When somebody had this situation, like they lost their child or their spouse or something, or they got sick and they were dying, and they expressed how the pain was, liberating on it. And so then these people, trying everything they could to get this feeling, trying to get like tangible experience of God and of what we're created to be, they would actually bring on suffering, physical suffering on themselves. We have portrayed some of the spiritual seekers that like have whipped themselves, or monks who have worn like horsehair shirts and things like that, climbed stairs on their knees with like sharp rocks or glass on them, had other people whip them. They've done things like this. They've starved themselves until they're almost dead. And we have said that's because they didn't know the gospel, and they were trying to make up for their sin. They thought they had to be punished. Well, that happened too, but that's not always the case. Some of the people that have done these things were people who did understand the gospel, but they weren't just trying to not go to hell. See, there's a huge difference between fire insurance and fixing up your house. You see the difference? Fire insurance is, spiritually or religiously, is I don't want to go to hell. When it's all over, I don't want to have that be time for punishment. I want it time for PA. I want to go and do all this cool virtual reality stuff that we hear about, and be on the walk on streets of transparent gold and walk on a sea of glass and swim without having scuba tanks and all of that stuff. Either you got to stick around for another 50 years until science comes up with it, or if Jesus comes, he'll do it when he gets here. Whatever. Magic. I want the magic stuff. No. In Mark chapter 10, a guy who had succeeded, a guy who, when he went to college and he took his business major, he took it seriously. And he lined up his ducks, all in the right row. And he had it going on. And I recommend you, when you, in your reading, your systematic reading, which, please keep up with it, don't get behind on it. It's heinous if you get behind. It's hard to catch up, and your mind won't hold too much at a time. It needs to digest and chew. It's like, you can't put the whole meal in your mouth at once, because it'll choke you and it doesn't taste as good. Do it as we go along, the best you can. But when you come to Mark 10, look really carefully at Mark 10. This guy came to Jesus, and he was a guy who did things right. He wasn't a screw-up. He was a winner, and he always had been, and it looked like he was going to keep being. But for some reason, he came to Jesus and he said, what do I have to do to get this? Now, in the Revised Standard Version that we have that we're all at least arranging to get, that we're not going to check on today, and I understand that they were out at the bookstore. So we won't check on whether you have it, but in the Revised Standard Version, it says, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? In the Greek, it says, what do I have to do to get that? Now the word is from the Greek aionios, and it isn't the kind of eternity that we think of that makes that little passage in Mark 10 look like a fire insurance question. He's not asking Jesus, what do I have to do so that instead of going to heaven, I can go to hell? Instead of going to hell, I can go to heaven. Yeah, that would be fun. There's even people that do that, but they're not here, I hope. But he wasn't asking him, I'm worried that I'm going to be damned. How do I avoid being damned? That's not his question. That Greek word is a pregnant word. It is a word that had a big history, that had its roots in sort of ethereal mysticism and utterly beyond. It meant not the kind of infinity that's like, okay, after 1 is 2, like if you're 2 years old, then after you get another birthday, you're 3, and if you get another birthday, you're 4, and I want to keep going to infinity. I don't want to die. It's not that kind of infinity. It's the kind of thing that right now, I want to be plugged in to all of infinity. Not just the parts I can see. Not just I got to pay my bills, and I got to take the dog out to go potty on time, and I got to get gas in the car so I can make it to work, and I've got to make sure that I have clean clothes, so I got to do the washer. It was the stuff that's like, what's going on that we can't see? What's the magic stuff? See, Jesus had been doing things and people had been hearing about them. Have any of you ever seen a holy person go to somebody that's dying? And when they get there, they find they're already dead. They didn't make it. They come in the hospital room and people going, sorry, you're too late. And they go, I have this. And they just go stand in the door of the hospital room and say, hey, let's go. And the dead guy stands up. Any of you seen that happen? Has it happened, even rumored, in the church that's your home church? Has it happened in the city, in some other church? Has it been rumored to have happened in California during your life? Has it been rumored to have occurred in the United States since I was born? You ever even heard a serious rumor about that? How about stories like taking a lunch pill and just taking a sandwich and handing it to somebody when you got thousands of people who've come together for some meetings, and you just take one Spider-Man lunch pill and it's got a peanut butter sandwich in it and some Fritos and some little raisin boxes and a juice box, and people line up and you take out of the pail, give everyone, you like raisins? Yeah, okay, here. Someone else says, I don't like raisins. You go, okay, we'll have peanuts. Oh, okay. And you just keep handing it out of this is Hermione's purse. You know? It's like Harry Potter with all this stuff Hermione had in the purse. You know, she had the whole, when they went camping, she had the whole get-up in the purse. And basically, Jesus did that, it says. Do you even believe he did? Do you actually believe he did? Did Jesus do that stuff? The dude who came to him in Mark 10, I think he believed that Jesus did really do those things. And he was a businessman. And he was a religious man. And he said, what do I have to do to get this, I want to come up off the page. I don't want to live like a stick character on the chalkboard. Now, you're going to have to forgive me. I know this sounds ridiculous in Christian spirituality, but I can't explain exactly what I'm talking about, the way my mind works, and I think the way his works. You ready for this? This is going to be killer. I've got to do some math. To make it make sense. I apologize to any of you that hate math, but I don't know how else to do this. Do you remember when you were a little kid that they made you do this stuff? Remember that? What's that thing called? What do they call that thing? What? The number line. They call it the number line. And they made you do things like addition and subtraction on the number line, didn't they? Remember? In your workbook or on your worksheet or whatever, or on your software, I don't know. They'd say, okay, if you have 2 and you take away 3, okay, then you start with 2 and you go 1, because it's takeaway, you go to the left, 2, 3, so it gives you -1. I mean, how many love this? Like, this is awesome. Okay, one of you
It helped me.
love it. And then, when you didn't even quite have the first one down, then they said, well, now we're gonna put another number line. It's gonna go up and down. And you remember that first number line? We're gonna give it a special name and call it X, and then the one that goes up and down, we're gonna call it the next letter in the alphabet, which is Y. Why? Because we love you, right? So they made you plot things like this. You go, oh, so when they're starting out easy. You don't have to operate on it. You have to just find it. So you go, okay, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Oh, shoot. Something stuck up in here. Okay, so here we go is 2, 3 right here. And it has an address. And well, you could use negative numbers and all that. And then, honestly, for a good number of folk in the room, this is as far as you ever went with putting number lines together. But for some of you, you stuck with it. You didn't want to, but you had a required cognate course or something, or you had to have it, to take physics or whatever. And then they started telling you, well, we can't really draw the next one because we're out of directions that have 90-degree angles to each other on the chalkboard. So instead, what we had to do is we have to pretend that we can draw it, but we have to picture it first, that it would be, if I could draw another number line, it would come straight out of the board for the positive, and it would go out into the hall, through the wall and under the hall for the negative. Okay, and it will go forever. So we're going to pretend that what I'm drawing now is coming toward us, because you can't draw out toward us. We ran out of the board. And then here, go like that to represent going behind. Okay? This is Z, X, Y, Z. And then they could say things to you like, well, I'm going to add another number, so you have X, Y, Z, and that would mean we go up this far, or over this far, and up this far, and then we would come out 1. So you would picture that it would be 1 unit off of the board towards you in a positive direction, and corresponding to coming over 2 and up 3. And that gives you an address for every single location in the universe. Because you could pretend that those lines go for infinity every direction. Every direction. So there's nowhere nowhere that the Hubble telescope can see, anywhere, that doesn't give you a legitimate address. It just starts measuring from that dot in the middle, the 0, 0, 0 point. And so that is sort of like the fishbowl that you and I are stuck in. We don't know how to jump out of the fishbowl, so we're stuck in a fishbowl like that. But there's one more thing you need to know to understand physical reality, the regular world, with washing machines and Volkswagens and those heinous little chocolate fake meat things and shoelaces and men and women and falcons, and I don't mean that as a ball team, I mean that as a bird. There's one more thing in order to describe the nature of every single particle, of the smallest particles that particles come in, can have an address. But reality also, you can't just say, where is it? You have to say, when was it there? Or when will it be there? Or when is it there? So we put one more on here, and that's time. So at the same time that we're setting this, right here, at 0, 0, 0, we also start a clock at 0, 0, 0. Boom. So then we can measure in seconds or nanoseconds or whatever you want to say. That means that if every single piece of stuff in all of the universe, every bit of matter is somewhere at some time. We can just use 4 numbers to describe that little point of matter, where it is and when it is or was there or will be. That is our physical world. That's it. That is not, even though it seems like it can go for infinity in every direction and time can go backwards and forwards, infinity, it doesn't give you infinity right now. It doesn't give you infinity right now. Jesus did things that don't keep the same kind of sensibility that you can describe logically. When he did things like when he went to his hometown and he stood up to read, and on the Sabbath he read from the scrolls, and he read the part of the prophet prophesying about the Messiah coming and all the things that the Messiah would do when he came. And they were saying, yes, we know Messiah is coming. And then he closed the scroll, and they were all quiet and looking at him. They'd been hearing that he'd been going around doing miraculous things. And he said, handing the scroll back to the attendant, he said, today, this has been fulfilled in your hearing. And they got that excited feeling in their stomach. Could this be real? And they're saying, and he's from here. He's from here. And in their hearts, all of the little bennies of having the Messiah come from their hometown, that's what came up in their hearts. I get all the goodies. He's from here. We're going to be the capital. We're all going to be like, we're all going to be trillionaires. We're all going to be in charge of the Roman world. We're going to be bosses. And Jesus said in his next breath, but don't think that gives you a hookup. That does not give you anything special. And it made them so mad that they picked him up and carried him to the cliff at the edge of the hill their town is built on. And were going to push him over the cliff. They were going to kill him. They were that mad. Which means probably there was more said. And it said basically that then he just slipped through the crowd without them being able to tell. He did the ninja thing. It's not the only time he did it. We'll talk more about it. We'll continue this discussion on Wednesday, Friday.